Hello, and welcome back to The 10th Man. This is episode 27. It is Friday, May 22nd, and today I am very excited to present this episode. We have a very special guest. He is a fixture of Sacramento Kings basketball. He's been on Sports 1140 for over 20 years. He currently hosts The Drive. It is a morning show. It airs from 6 to 9 a.m. And just speaking from one diehard Kings fan to another, it was a great conversation we had. We both have grown up in Sacramento and both have similar stories in terms of how we got started in radio. I actually work with him at KHTK, but not on the air. So this was just a great opportunity. And I was just super thankful for him for taking the time to talk with me. We talked a little bit sports, a little bit COVID, and just radio life in general. And without further ado, here is our conversation. Hey, Carmichael Dave.
Yo, what's up, man?
How's it going, man?
Good, brother. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for calling in.
No, my pleasure, man. Let's rock and roll. No problem at all. My pleasure.
Yeah, super appreciative. You're the first celebrity figure on my show.
Oh, then you're doing something wrong, man. If I'm the first celebrity, that's a stretch of a term. No, man, my pleasure. I believe it or not, I've been in your shoes, but I did not have the benefit of all this fun technology to do this stuff. So you gotta remember where you started, man, and appreciate it.
Well, yeah, no, that's why. I mean, I was thinking about you because I remembered. I've mentioned on my podcast a couple times that I actually work for KHTK, but I'm not on the air, so it's kind of nice. I've got somebody now who can vouch for me. We met up back at Corner Pocket on Super Bowl, and I remember meeting you, and you were just super nice, down to earth, and and I've heard you over the years, and especially being a big longtime Kings fan, the people who report on the Kings, I consider them celebrities. So the fact that you were just so friendly and approachable, I remembered that, and I remembered you mentioning that you kind of had a similar startup in radio. So I thought that was kind of could make for some interesting conversation.
Absolutely, man. No, it's a fun story. So I'm good. I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay. Yeah. I know a little bit about your background. I guess I just kind of wanted to hear from your side in terms of, what got you into radio. I know I was reading up a little bit. I saw that you used to do some sports casts on your own, kind of like recording yourself and then grading yourself. I used to do kind of a similar thing where I would record on not a VHS, on audio cassette, and then I would do like a call-in show, and I would do voices for the people calling in. So probably sounded pretty crazy to somebody who was outside of the door, but I just think stuff like that is pretty interesting. The things that draw us into radio.
Well, one of the earliest lessons I learned is, especially people when they get into this business new, if something goes wrong or they need to pull back the curtain or something, they tend to freak out. I've always been a share everything on the air, be open guy. So in the spirit of that, are we recording right now? Are we good to go?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Once the invite goes out, as soon as you answer, it's basically recording.
See, that's why I was giving you short answers. I thought we were going to have to count. I didn't want to start rambling. And then you'd be like, okay, cool. Thanks for that answer. Now I need to hit record. All right. So we're good. That's why. If you were wondering why I was giving you 1 sentence answers. Okay. So
no, I was interested in that, but I was like, okay, he's going to make me work for it a little bit. That's cool.
No, I truly didn't think we were recording. That's awesome. All right. So
I might just keep all this because my thing, kind of like you just said, especially with podcasting, is like, I just like how organic and raw it is, because you don't have the constraints of like a radio with a time limit and all that. So
you should keep it all. You should, and show the warts and all, because I think humanizing oneself to the audience is a key. I've never
Right.
been the type of dude that thinks he's a professional or, whatever. That's Jim Rome and Colin Coward and Dan Patrick. I got into the business as a caller. I used to call into Kings post game shows when I was a teenager, and I had a boom box that I could hit record on, and I carried it around with me everywhere so that if I was at a friend's house or something, I could, they'd roll their eyes at me, and rightfully so. But I'd sneak into another
Right.
room, I'd wait on hold, I'd do my call, and then I'd have a tape of all my calls, and I'd be my own program director. So
Right.
that's a big way to get experience. Is people say, well, how do I get in the business? How can I get better? Just even if it's for an audience of you,
Right.
just do it. Repetition is key.
Right. Is it true that Jason Ross told you that if you called in every day for a year that he'd get you a job?
So Jason Ross and a guy named Steve Buzzard, two of the greatest people you'll ever meet, were both doing the post game show,
Uh-huh.
and that's when I was Dave and Carmichael, like Fred and Elk Grove or Billy and
Right.
Rockland. And back when it was real caller heavy radio, if you became a familiar enough name, they would sometimes switch it around to Fair Oaks Rick or Rockland Bob, and I
Right.
was Carmichael Dave, and that's stuck. And they
Yeah.
told me, they said, hey, listen, if you want to, now that I'm on the other side, I kind of get it. If you can get callers that can complete a sentence basically and are somewhat coherent, it's a
Right.
great way to start off. That nothing gets calls going like other callers. People hear callers call in, and maybe they have a take that's passionate or controversial or whatever, and that
Right.
always gets the ball rolling. So yeah, they said, hey, as long as you promise to call in, we'll let you up first every night. And man, I if I missed a game, I don't remember it. For a number of years, I was every single game I was on hold. I kind of memorized how long it took until they were about to go to calls. I'd get in
Right.
and just put it on speaker and chill out and wait.
That's so cool. Yeah, and kind of like to your point also about encouraging other people to call in. I think that for me anyway, that kind of gets back to the approachability factor for you because I've always been a little bit nervous about calling into shows, and in fact, I think I mentioned to you when we met at Corner Pocket that I had called into the afternoon the Doug the Grant and Doug show with the Kobe Bryant death, and just because of the fact that that in particular was so moving to me that it and kind of like you said, you're hearing so many other people telling the stories, but I have to say I'm more intimidated about calling into somebody like a Grant Napier than I am to somebody like you because frankly Grant scares me sometimes. He can turn on a dime if the caller says the wrong thing.
That makes me laugh because when my first break into KHTK after interning on the weekend shows was doing backup updates to Jason Ross. And Jason would do what was in the Grant Napier and Mike Lamb show, and then Jim Cosmore show after it. So I grew up idolizing Grant Napier, truly one of my
Right.
top 3 idols in sports and radio broadcasting. And
Yeah.
I
Sure.
had, grown up listening to him, his calls, his radio. So for the longest time, for a few months, I was, and Grant has told the story too. I was scared to death of Grant. I would call him Mr. Napier, and one of the guys that works there who ended up being a program director years later, Kevin Sherritt, who ended up being a real good friend of mine. He told me before my first update with Grant and Mike, he said, "Hey, dude, listen, Grant's a cool dude. Don't worry about it. But one thing that really bothers him is don't make eye contact. Whatever you do, just don't make eye contact. It just freaks him
Really?
out." Dude, and I thought he was serious. So like for the first 5 times I was around Grant, I didn't make eye contact. I would
That's
just
funny.
answer.
I
And then
thought you were
finally,
serious just now telling me.
no, right. Grant has a very intimidating way about him. And then
Yeah.
finally, because Grant's like an older, he's old enough to be my, an older brother type of thing. He finally
Right.
says, "Dude, hey, how come you never look at me like when you talk?
Right.
Are you okay?"
Right.
And I told him the story, and he just laughed, and he goes,
That's
"Man,
funny.
you got had." And to this day, it's so funny. Radio Grant's and is Radio Grant. But
Right.
he has, for many, many years now, been one of my best friends. The guy will do anything for you. He is amazingly charitable with his time, with his foundation. It's one of those things where you're afraid to meet your heroes, and then occasionally you meet them, and they exceed your expectations. He's a great dude.
Yeah, no, I should also add that the intimidation factor doesn't preclude my respect or adoration, because I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I grew up and kind of came of age in the '90s, and always was a huge fan of him and Jerry Reynolds. The broadcasting, and then I also do remember, and obviously as well, you were heavily involved in obviously the keeping the Kings in Sacramento, and I actually remember the last game that could have been the last game in Sacramento, and he and Jerry Reynolds had this really emotional moment after the game, and it really shows you the humanity, and as you said, very. I think a lot of it is just when you're just deeply passionate about what you do. You take it seriously and you have a lot of respect for it, and thusly you don't have a lot of patience for people bringing in stupid bullshit, I guess,
Well, everybody has their own personality. Grant's from New York, and they have a very different style of sports radio. If you're going to call in with Grant and Doug, you better be ready to go. You better be prepared, and you better do your thing. They're very, you have an ex-athlete legend, and you have Grant, who's been in the business forever and around the game forever. They're very sports oriented. I came from being a caller. That's how I started. So it's a little bit easier to call in to somebody like me, most likely, because I tend to have a little bit more patience and a little bit more understanding of how difficult it is. Plus, I'm not nearly as professional as Grant. So if somebody, if I have a terrible phone call, if I have a mean phone call or somebody who's being a dick, I'll deal with them. But if somebody's just not they're freaking out a little bit or nervous or whatever, I love those. Those are the ones that tend to get me going, and more often than not, they turn into 10-minute segments with the callers we limp through, and then they end up calling in regularly. So I actually love those types of calls.
Well, also, and one of the things I really like about you is you really just kind of, I feel like you just kind of wear your heart on your sleeve, and you kind of take it or leave it. And I mean, I remember I think it was maybe a month or so ago, actually there was a KHTK Facebook post, and somebody was on there complaining about how you were apparently getting too political on the show, and you were kind of just like, well, you're free to turn the dial, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And I think that I felt like it kind of irked him that he wasn't having the effect that he intended.
No, and I've always, I'm sure the bosses would hate to hear that, but at the same time, they get it. They know how I am. I love our audience. I love anybody that listens. I love people that they're feeding my family by taking the time, and I will respect them. But I will never change. Listen, there are rules we have. I'm not going to say the F word. I'm not gonna slander anyone without proof. But as far as opinions and those subjects I have opinions on, when I'm on the radio, I am who I am, and I make no apologies, and you're going to like me or not like me. And if somebody shows up and says, hey, I don't like it when you do this, I have two choices. I can say, okay, well, thanks for the advice. I won't do it anymore. Or I can say, hey, listen, you know what? I'm married to my wife. I love her to death. She's my life partner, but every once in a while she pisses me off, but I don't get a divorce. So if you can handle it, great, and you're welcome in, and I appreciate the criticism, and I'll argue with you all day. But if you can't handle it, there are a lot of options for you, man, and odds are they probably weren't a listener anyways.
Well, yeah, that's probably true also. I think it just all comes down to respect at the end of the day. We can all have our different views and perceptions on things, but as long as you keep it respectful, and again, like for me personally, that's what I love about the podcast, because it's I kind of venture into different areas, and of course you kind of mentioned earlier, it is a kind of a fortunate age for that kind of thing, because even like 10 or 15 years ago, the accessibility to do something like this was not the level that it is now, but it's definitely been fun.
No, the the technology has definitely given us accessibility like we've never had before, and people are able to do things now. The opportunities to broadcast are so vast and wide. It really
Right.
is a wild west out there. And honestly, both TV and radio broadcasting, or should I say video and audio, with the invention of, with the onslaught of Netflix and all these streaming capacities, and then anybody with a microphone or an iPhone truly can now do a
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
And kind of like what we're doing right now. Years ago when I broke in, now I'm going to sound boomery, but it just, you couldn't do that. I remember
Yeah.
going to Radio Shack and getting a couple of microphones that I had to get a microphone splitter, and then
Mhm.
I had to get two microphones that would plug into that splitter, and then they would we would put it into my boom box, and me and a buddy or just me would sit there and talk into the mic, and it sounded horrible while we recorded on a cassette tape.
Right.
And then I would take that tape into a double decker boom box. God, I sound old. And then I would record musical intros and outros and kind of create a show. It's like now,
Wow.
oh
Yeah.
my God, if you have a laptop and an iPhone,
Right.
hell, you're like you can do broadcast quality stuff, which is awesome.
That's really amazing that you went through all that effort. And I think I guess the kind of flip side to that, of course, is that it's so oversaturated now with podcasters that the competition it's kind of like with Uber, right? Like in taxis and everything, like you just get so oversaturated with sort of the competition that you really have to kind of up your game. As I said, like I personally, growing up in Sacramento, I've always really respected you. So for me, it feels like having a celebrity. But I also like the kind of local factor as well. Both of us having grown up in Sacramento, and just the whole Carmichael Dave. As you mentioned before, I just I really like that.
Well, it's all I am. I mean, I couldn't. I've had I've had offers in other markets before, and it just doesn't work. Carmichael Dave doesn't work in Houston or New York or
Right.
Omaha, and I've never had any. Listen, I'm not gonna lie. If somebody offered me $10 million a year to go work in Jacksonville tomorrow, I'd do it because I'm not an idiot. But
Right.
short of that,
Right.
there's truly no other city I'd rather live in. I don't want to live in I don't want to do radio in a city. I do not want to do radio in a city. And think about this. Probably, I would say 70%, maybe it's less now, of usually your broadcasters on local radio are not from that area. Grant's from New York, Doug's from Seattle, and this is no slight at them. This is a compliment to them.
Right.
I wouldn't have the ability to do sports radio in a market where I didn't root for the teams. I don't want to talk to people on the phone all day or get passionate or have to watch games where,
Right.
if I'm living in Phoenix, I don't care about the Cardinals or the Suns or the Coyotes or the Diamondbacks, and so now it becomes a job.
Right.
Here, I'm going to watch the Niners, the Raiders, the A's, the Giants, the Kings, the River Cats, the Republic. I'm already going to watch them. So I'm just talking to people about things we share a true passion for. That's why I really can never move markets. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, really, it's the personal side of it, and I think that really shines through in your craft, really, because you really do come across as just a sincere, passionate person. And I think, especially in sports radio, I think such a huge part of it, and it kind of gets back to what you were saying before about encouraging people to call in, is people have to hear that sincerity and feel like you're kind of one of them.
I think that radio can be a very intimidating place, but it can also be just a phone call.
I wanted to just kind of ask you in general, because I was actually listening this morning, and you had Senator Pan, and I was going to say I really appreciate that you do that, because I think that's such an important topic. And pretty much in the last month or so on my podcast, I've almost exclusively been talking COVID-19, not necessarily even by design, but just out of the fact that it's just become such a big part of all of our lives. And you said something this morning that really struck me, because you said that you were kind of feeling scared about the businesses opening back up, and that you were kind of concerned that it made you like not as manly. And in my podcast, like I said, I've been talking about it, and I really was voicing a lot of the same concerns. So it's nice to hear that. I mean, obviously, it's not nice that people are concerned, but it's nice that you're not alone in that, and that these problems are really something serious that we need to really think seriously about.
I spend a lot of time on social media. I love interacting with people. So when I'm not on the air, oftentimes you'll find me on Twitter or Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with social media is that it's usually it's predominantly very much a certain personality type, and you tend to get your opinions skewed. Almost every poll I've seen is somewhere between 70 and 80%. They support the things taken, the precautions taken. They are concerned very with getting the disease and the spread of it and blah, blah, blah. But when you go on social media, there's so many people that, and listen, let's just be honest. And this is where you're either going to appreciate what I'm saying or think I'm a douchebag, but I just can't filter it. Their social media gives a certain sect of people who really don't get much attention in real life. They're frustrated. They're, everybody wants to be heard, and not everybody's lucky enough to be able to have a platform. So people go on social media and they use that as a platform, and that's fantastic. But the problem is that more often than not, they carry with them these insecurities, and they need to prove to everybody how great they are. So you go on social media and you see these people videoing themselves not wearing masks, or talking about these massive conspiracy theories, or talking about how they see through all the crap and they're not a sheep. Well, not everybody, but generally that personality type, and I'm very much into psychology, those are the types that they need to feel like they're in control, and they need everybody else to know that they're not scared. They're generally the most scared of everyone.
Right.
And they need to feel, when you have something like COVID-19, which is a novel coronavirus, a new coronavirus, there is no control. The best doctors and scientists in the world don't know what they're figuring it out as they go. A lot of people can't handle that. So much like back in the day, the sun revolved around the earth and fire came from the gods, and all the things that we've told ourselves throughout history when we can't answer a question. You're seeing that on social media right now, where people need to feel like they're in control, and the one way they do that is try to espouse these beliefs where everyone else doesn't get it, but they and their friends do. Okay, well, I get it, dude. You're freaked out. Just nothing. No. There's no shame in saying you're worried about a virus that shut down the freaking world. It's okay, brother.
Right. Yeah, it's this sort of like inconvenient truth, in a sense of not wanting to believe something that isn't good for you, but it doesn't change the fact. I think you mentioned. I think I heard you mention on the show this morning, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were saying something about how science doesn't care about your emotions. And that's just, to your point, you can feel however way you want about it. But the fact is, I mean, we're approaching 100,000 deaths. And like the thing I always think about when we're talking about reopening is how the 100,000 deaths is with everything that we've done up until this point, wearing the masks, the quarantines, and the social distancing, and having an hour in the morning just for elderly people to shop. That's with all of that. So imagine if we had just done what some of these people think, that we're just overblowing it, and hadn't done any of this. I mean, just looking at a complete disaster.
Well, that's part of the problem. And you're correct, except one thing. It was done mostly with those provisions, but we went for a good amount of time without the provisions. And people need to realize that, hey, listen, the virus, and who knows, barring a miracle, maybe the virus has a shelf life of 6 months. Maybe the virus gets weaker as it goes. Maybe he does get rid of the virus. Anybody who says no doesn't know what they're talking about, because nobody knows what they're talking about.
Right.
But the virus didn't say, you know what? These businesses have been shut down for a while, and I know that Bill and Jane are bored and want to see their friends, and everybody hates having sports. We're going to go ahead and not infect really that many people now. No, dude, it's the same virus that was here 3 months ago, 4 months ago. It's the same deal. Now, it's not going to be, you would think, as bad because there is social distancing. People are wearing
Right.
masks, and even if it's not everybody, it's a lot more than we're doing it 4 months ago. So I don't think it will be as bad. What I worry about is that we will just have a fairly steady amount of cases, of deaths, and the occasional outbreak, and you
Mhm.
just hope that that outbreak doesn't go too crazy.
Right. Oh yeah, I think that's exactly right. And again, I mean, until we have a vaccine, I just don't know how you can reasonably expect it, other than just kind of that wishful thinking. Um, how would you say it's affected you in terms of, obviously, like for me, I haven't stepped foot in the KHTK building in close to 2 months now, because they've pretty much, all the promotions people, they're not doing any, obviously they're not doing any group events or anything like that. But obviously working in radio, there's things you can do. But how has that affected you in terms of your day-to-day job and also your home life?
Well, I just finished week 9 of being away from the studio and doing things at my house. Um, it has affected me and my life and my family's life uh, in some pretty crazy ways. But I'm one of the lucky ones, man. I got a job. I can do it from home. And my wife, who now works from home all but 1 or 2 days a week, we have 2 children, 12 and 11. And
Mhm.
this has been tough on kids. And they've had to be home and distance learn. And one thing that's fantastic is I can get off the air at 9. I go straight in, make sure the kids are had breakfast or ready to go and are getting ready to do their thing. I can help them with their homework. I can assist them because they don't have teachers there. A lot of parents have kind of become de facto home teachers. And
Right.
so I can go, listen, I could spend 10 minutes telling you about all the how much it sucks and the things that have had to switch around because a lot of it sucks.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I refuse. You gotta look at the bright side, man. There's people out there that are like, yeah, I'm at home every day because I don't have a job and I don't know where I'm gonna go and I don't know what I'm gonna do. So
Hmm.
for me, broadcasting from my home studio is, like I said, I'm one of the lucky ones, man.
Right. Do you think that this is going to have any long-term effects? And because, like you mentioned just now about you work in an industry that it's fairly easy to kind of make those concessions because you can, as you said, you can broadcast from home. Uh, do you think that there's going to be some long-term implications, even if we do get a vaccine, but just in terms of, because like the way I look at it, for me, this has been eye-opening in the sense of there are a lot of things that we can do through telework. And like, for example, I work in the Bay, and for me, it's been great, like not having to be away from my kids. Like I get to spend more nights with my kids, and I'm also saving a whole lot on gas. So do you see that as being, do you see maybe some long-term changes happening
Oh,
after this?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think the best analogy that we've heard is, did things get back to normal after 9/11? Kind of, but we still to this day carry some of those obligations and so-called burdens. I think it'll be the same. I think radio, for example, I think people have learned that you don't have to be in the studio. Now it's a better setup, but if I am a broadcast medium and I can save on rent, I can save on equipment, I can save on labor, and I can have my hosts be remote and just save on the real estate and expense itself, then it's definitely something I think a lot of people are going to look at. And I think that goes for a lot of other jobs as well. As you said, teleworking, Zoom, Cisco WebEx, Microsoft Teams. These are all things a lot of people didn't know back in the day. And now
Right.
you're going to see a lot of businesses saying, listen, the majority of businesses, you gotta be there. But there are going to be more now that say, you know what? We don't really need to be there. We can do this other stuff and we can save money. So yeah, that's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, and I really look at it also from just sort of a carbon footprint environmentalist perspective too. You've seen like how the pollution has gone down in LA. There's rivers in Naples, Italy, that you can actually see the bottom of the river. And I think that it's for me, I hope that, and maybe I'm just being idealistic, but I hope that maybe it makes us as a society kind of relook at how we take the issue of climate change. And I think, unfortunately, though, maybe you kind of mentioned earlier the people on social media who kind of just choose to not believe what doesn't convenience them. And I guess maybe those people probably won't be convinced no matter what kind of results we see in terms of the carbon emissions and all that kind of thing. But I still hold on to some hope.
Nah, they won't be convinced. I mean,
yeah,
you just have people that want to live the way they want to live, and they're not going to believe it. It's easier for them to call it fake news than to actually take responsibility. Now, the other side of the equation is this, man. I'm not a religious dude, but boy, do I believe in Mother Nature. And Mother Nature has a very interesting way. I think that this shouldn't be mistaken for people feeling the need to do what they want to do. But I think it is I've always thought it is incredibly pompous of us as a species to believe that we could do anything other than, nuclear bombs, and that's a different story. Mother Nature's going to take care of itself. Mother Nature's going to, when Mother Nature gets pushed to the limit, Mother Nature has a strange way of letting us know, even if we don't listen, that ain't gonna work, guys. And if we were to push, the reason people should be afraid is that if you get to a certain point, pollution wise, climate wise, whatever, well, here's what's gonna happen. Okay, world's gonna heat up, people are gonna die off, ice shelves are gonna do their thing. It's gonna affect humans. We're gonna die, a lot of us. Life's gonna change.
Sure.
Earth's still going to be here. It's just going to be a different kind of Earth, and there will be animals that can adapt and animals that can't. So I've always had a lot of faith in the Earth and the fact that she'll let us know when we're screwing up.
Right. Well, it's been a privilege to talk to you, and I'm cognizant that it's we're moving along in the day here, and I don't want to hold you up any longer, but super appreciative of you taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, dude, it's my pleasure. Listen, you're doing what people should do. You're going out and you're practicing and you're learning and you're perfecting your craft. And there is no magic sauce. There's no formula. You just learning to converse and kicking back and having a conversation. People listen to the radio to be entertained, but people listen to the radio because they're voyeurs. They want to feel like a fly in the wall. And being conversational and having a talk and not having to do, hey, 5 past the hour, let's go to, I can't do that. And so you're off to a great start. You call me anytime, let me know. It's absolutely my pleasure, my man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, brother. You take care.
All right. You too, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. As I said, I have a lot of respect for Carmichael Dave. If you get a chance, check him out on The Drive, Sports 1140 KHTK, every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 a.m. It's always good, lively conversation. They talk Kings basketball, but they also just talk general events in sports. And lately they've been talking about COVID as well, just like I've been. So definitely recommend checking him out. You can also check out KHTK.com, and you can listen to playbacks of the show. I hope that you've enjoyed. I certainly had a good time chatting with him, and I will be talking to you guys again really soon. Thanks again, and remember, don't be afraid to question the consensus.